So she quickly explained that the pendant was completely safe. I swear, but Callie still had no reaction. I'm really innocent. Charlotte looked like she was about to cry. Callie's finally reacted. I was just a bit surprised. Then he smiled and said, of course I'm willing to do such a small favor. It might be difficult for you to meet today. I'll formally invite you soon. Charlotte immediately thanked him and curtsied. She didn't expect Callis to invite her proactively. She was naturally grateful. The chance to see the child and potentially foresee the future. She wouldn't miss it. Meanwhile, the child was timidly looking at Libin. Why did he say such things earlier? It turned out that before the party started, Libin had told Sass. Miss Charlotte has also been invited to the ball, but you better pretend not to know her. She's a very dangerous person, but as Lady Charlotte was clearly a very good person. Compared to the now gloomy-faced Libin, Libin seemed more dangerous. At this moment, Libin was about to pour another drink for the child. Just as Libin left the child's side, a nobleman approached trying to get close. Then he suddenly leaned close to Sass. Please be careful of Miss Charlotte. Then he said word by word, because she's been secretly in love with the Grand Duke for 10 years. To get close to the Grand Duke, she'll definitely make a move on you. The man thought his words would scare the little one, but what he didn't expect was that the child's eyes lit up, sparkling with pink bubbles. His mind was filled with images of Uncle and Charlotte being lovey-dovey. The child looked gratefully at the man. This completely confused the man. The nobleman wanted to say more when he suddenly felt the air pressure around him freeze. It was Callie's. One look from Callie's left and petrified. The man immediately bowed 180 degrees, then quickly slipped away. After Callie's gently comforted the child, he took out an exquisite small box. This is a gift from Miss Charlotte for you. The child immediately clutched it preciously. Seeing how much the child missed Charlotte, Callie's felt very sympathetic. He immediately asked Libin to take the child to see her. Don't you want to see her? Go now. The child's gloom instantly vanished, revealing a smile that could move heaven and earth. Charlotte, having completed her task, was preparing to return home. But suddenly she felt something tugging at her skirt, just as she was about to turn around angrily. She found a tearful child saying, Ladies, Charlotte, I missed you so much. Charlotte, who thought she wouldn't see the child, was also very happy. Your Highness, congratulations on finding your family. Please don't call me Your Highness, call me Saron. As he spoke, he started crying again. Then his little hand gripped Charlotte's skirt tightly. He pleaded pitifully, Can't you stay with me forever? Charlotte felt both happy and a bit heartbroken seeing this. So the next day, Charlotte appeared at the palace. She didn't expect Callie's invitation to come so quickly, but remembering her own teary-eyed self, she just couldn't refuse. However, if it weren't for the appearance of her ability to foresee the future, she would have returned to her territory long ago. But the prediction of her father being in danger still worried her. As for Sass, he had been clinging to Charlotte's skirt the whole way. Charlotte came back to her senses, held Sass's little hand, and called him Your Highness Prince Sass. The child, upon hearing this, protested. With teary eyes, he said pitifully, Didn't you promise to call me by my name? Charlotte was speechless. She didn't dare risk losing her head, right? At this moment, the butler behind him also requested Charlotte to accept His Highness's proposal. Charlotte then understood that it had been approved. She herself didn't like all these formalities anyway, so this was even better. Seeing his beloved Lady Charlotte, the little one excitedly showed her around his world. Charlotte listened contentedly as the child described how the Grand Duke treated him. Sass pointed at an exquisite little rocking horse and said, Look, isn't this horse beautiful? Uncle gave it to me. I usually ride this horse to view the courtyard. Seeing the child's excited and adorable appearance, Charlotte's heart melted. Unable to control her expression, she gave a slightly creepy thumbs up. You're so cute. As soon as she said it, she realized, isn't this a bit perverse? Won't the little one be scared? But the next moment, the child rushed into Charlotte's arms. He said in a muffled voice, I'm always so happy to see you. I love the feeling of Lady Charlotte hugging me. Charlotte patted the child's head. I like you too. Then does Lady Charlotte like my uncle too? Charlotte's hand froze in midair. Which bastard spread this news to my precious child? It seemed necessary to explain. No, I don't like him at all. The little one's face fell instantly. His beautiful fantasy was shattered just like that. The child suddenly became anxious, thinking Charlotte disliked his uncle. Charlotte, of course, didn't dislike him. He's a very good person, but no matter how good he was, it couldn't happen. Otherwise, she would really reach a grand finale. The child's face brightened up as if seeing hope. Charlotte quickly hugged the child and patted his head. This silly child always imagined things. Then Sass pulled Charlotte to the garden, and Sass's purpose for coming here was Callis in the garden. But the moment their eyes met, that strange voice appeared again. The little bundle that the villainous woman accidentally saved turned out to be the exiled crown prince. But by coincidence, it ruined the female lead's happy life, wanting to actively make amends to the female lead, but she was mistaken by the female lead as a crazy woman. That's what Charlotte got for her notorious reputation. Meanwhile, Calix was troubled by his nephew's situation. He even unconsciously called out Charlotte's name while working. Libby was confused. How could His Grace the Grand Duke think of that crazy woman? Calix explained that Sass had been crying out her name in his sleep. Upon hearing this, Libby became furious and wanted to arrest Charlotte on the spot. Calix was speechless. Can't you use your brain? It wasn't the kind of crying you're imagining. That pitiful, tearful state seemed more like he was missing her. Libby's anger immediately subsided. He didn't understand why His Highness Sass would miss that crazy woman. He admitted that he had also been suspicious of His Highness, saying that he had been wandering outside but was unusually clean. Libin suggested asking His Highness Sass directly, but Calix felt that his nephew must have his reasons for not speaking. He then arranged for Libin to investigate Charlotte, but now the more troublesome issue was, the queen seemed to have noticed that they had found the prince. To be safe, the ball to announce Sass' identity had to be postponed for another week, and before that they must find that Charlotte. Meanwhile, Charlotte herself was also thinking about the little one. As she thought about it, she started to act erratically. Why hadn't she received news about the announcement of the little one's identity? However, Charlotte's only concern was wanting to bring Ellie into the ball, to give the male and female leads a perfect encounter. As time flew by, Charlotte still hadn't received any news about the little one. Even her father, the dupe, couldn't help but guess. Such a cute child, he couldn't have been kicked out, right? Charlotte thought it impossible. Black hair, blue eyes, plus the beauty mark on the right cheek. It couldn't possibly be fake. Absolutely impossible. So Charlotte guessed the Grand Duke must be afraid of the Queen harming the prince. That's why he hadn't announced the news yet, but concern leads to confusion. Charlotte couldn't help but freak out. Could it be that the little one really was in the crown prince? After bursting through the door, this was the scene they saw. The father and daughter, one trembling with concern, the other anxiously banging on the table. But there was an even more serious matter at hand. Grand Duke Calix was actually inviting Charlotte to attend the ball. The Duke thought long and hard, panicking, and finally concluded he must want to take revenge for Charlotte stalking him years ago at such an important occasion. But Charlotte simply rejected this idea. No matter how deep the grudge, he wouldn't ruin such an important ball. But Charlotte couldn't understand. The purpose of this ball was to introduce the crown prince. So many nobles would receive invitations as an exception. But in the original story, he didn't invite Charlotte, but she still came uninvited. At the same time, she discovered that Calix was flirting with a Leon. He even publicly announced their relationship. Upon returning home, she began to throw tantrums and go crazy, extremely agitated. She even started researching poisons, wanting to poison a Leon. Now all of this was going against the original story, making Charlotte feel uneasy. Her father, Lienta, couldn't sit still and wanted to confront Calix right away. Charlotte immediately stopped him, saying he wouldn't attend the ball and that he should return to their territory early because it was too dangerous here. But suddenly, sobbing sounds were heard. Looking up, they found the Duke already in tears. It turned out the Duke thought Charlotte was sacrificing her love for the sake of the family. His daughter had finally grown up as a father. How could he allow his daughter to be so wronged? He immediately wanted to go to the Grand Duke's mansion to send a marriage proposal. Charlotte was petrified upon hearing this. These severely off-track lines even made the teacup shatter. She immediately stated seriously that she no longer liked him. As they say, the fear of sudden silence. Fortunately, a quick-witted servant broke the awkward silence, but the Duke refused to believe anything, feeling more and more that his daughter was being wronged. Charlotte was speechless. I really don't like him anymore. I've even forgotten what he looks like. Charlotte wasn't lying. She remembered all the content of the original story, except she couldn't recall what Grand Duke Calix looked like. So she stated once again that she absolutely would not attend the ball. But the Duke was in tears, encouraging Charlotte to pursue her happiness. So the embarrassed Charlotte came to the embarrassing ball. Her awkward toes dug out a 3-room apartment. At this moment, Grand Duke Calix made a grand entrance. Even Charlotte had to admit the original owner had a unique taste. Especially the tightness that even clothes couldn't contain. I suppose everyone has guessed the purpose of this ball. Now let me introduce to you all, this is my nephew, who is also the former prince named Sass Lasalalapan. Charlotte finally felt relieved at this sight. The little one, as soon as he appeared, looked around searching for something. He quickly spotted Charlotte in the crowd, but in the next moment he turned his head away with a hurt expression. Charlotte was stunned. She thought to herself, this child is really obedient, but why did she feel a bit disappointed? Suddenly, she felt a cold gaze. Turning to look, it was Callis who had been staring at her intently. Charlotte's heart blurted out a type of plant. You can't see me, you can't see me. However, Callis still approached Charlotte with a fierce look like a predator locking onto its prey. The words, "Thank you for accepting the invitation to the ball," broke Charlotte's panic. "May I have a word with you?" Immediately, the room was filled with whispers. Charlotte was devastated. If her father knew about this, even a bottle of stomach medicine wouldn't help. Suddenly, Charlotte felt dizzy and a voice appeared out of nowhere. My daughter said, absolutely not, it's better to just kill her. What can I do? I wonder what expression Miss Charlotte will show. Her father is willing to die in her place to save her. The voice disappeared. Charlotte was momentarily stunned. This situation didn't appear in the original story. Was this a glimpse of future events? But in the original story, the Duke didn't die. Could it be that because she changed the plot, her father would die because of her? At this moment, Callie stepped forward and asked, "You don't look well, is something wrong?" Charlotte, still shaken, said it was nothing. Following Callie's to the balcony, Charlotte was still guessing. Could it be that making eye contact with Callie's gives her foresight? Callie's got straight to the point. The one who brought Sass to the Grand Duke's mansion was you, Charlotte? Charlotte trembled in fear upon hearing this. Sass even called out Lady Charlotte in his sleep. Charlotte's face turned even darker. She didn't expect the little one would betray her in his dreams. Upon hearing this, Charlotte quickly explained that she didn't approach him intentionally. She really did save the former prince by chance, and it was before she saw the Wana poster. No, you misunderstand. Thanks to you, Sass has been able to live happily for so long. You are my benefactor and Aluidin's benefactor. I can fulfill any request you have. Charlotte placed her hand on her suddenly trembling heart. Will you really grant any wish of mine? A woman transmigrates into a book, life becomes bumpy. To save her life, she hides in the mountains. But the prince finds her, wanting to give his uncle to her. From then on, the prince wants to chase her away. For the prince's safety, she can only heartlessly send him away. Can't continue to rhyme anymore. The rap ends here. Sending the little yellow one to the Grand Duke's mansion was originally supposed to be the female lead's plot. To avoid altering the original story as much as possible, Charlotte took out the wanted poster for the former prince that Callie's had issued. This was what she had agreed upon with the little one. It must be said that she found him by chance. That's why she brought him here. Absolutely cannot mention me to the Grand Duke. The little one was very touched after hearing this. Lady Charlotte does good deeds without leaving her name. She's truly a living lay phone. Seeing the little one hesitate, Charlotte continued to push. If your uncle knows I brought you there, he won't let me see you anymore. The thought of not seeing Lady Charlotte again was absolutely unacceptable, so he immediately agreed. So Charlotte felt reassured to send the little one to the Grand Duke's mansion. At the entrance, the little one looked anxious and turned back to look at Charlotte. Charlotte was happy that the little one was about to start a happy life, but the little one expressed that he really wanted to stick with Charlotte. Yet he was afraid Charlotte would get tired of him. He could only run towards the Grand Duke without looking back. Seeing this, Charlotte finally felt relieved. It seemed the little one's safety was finally guaranteed. She reluctantly rolled down the car window, but there was still one problem unsolved. After all, she had hindered the female lead's path to wealth and glory. She felt quite guilty about it. So she decided to compensate the female lead and do some good deeds along the way. So when she got home, she asked her father to sell off their assets, to establish a foundation to support poor artists and orphanages. She didn't notice her father's trembling figure, but Duke Liental wasn't angry at all. Instead, he showed an expression of his daughter growing up. Even the servants were surprised when they heard about it. My daughter, your old man's love wasn't in vain. I knew you were a child full of love. Then he hugged Charlotte tightly and cried loudly. He said he would immediately prepare 50 million from the bank. Charlotte was embarrassed when she heard this. It was as if they were really going to sell the Duke's mansion. She quickly said that 10 million would be enough, no need to be so dramatic. Unexpectedly, the Duke burst into tears upon hearing this. My daughter is so frugal, I'll give you anything you want in the future. I can even bring Callie's to you tied up, looking at her father and the servant's eyes. Charlotte understood why his daughter was so willful in the original story. It was all from being spoiled. After getting the money, she went to the art square. She happened to see a man bullying a girl. Coincidentally, the bullied woman was the female lad Elian. She was born into a fallen Viscount family and had been looked down upon by others since childhood. Originally, she was supposed to turn her life around by saving the prince, but now it had been accidentally ruined by Charlotte. Charlotte, already feeling guilty, naturally couldn't stand by and do nothing. So she stepped forward wanting to buy Alien's painting. But in Alien's perspective, Charlotte appeared sinister, as if she could devour people without spitting out bones. Her heart sank. How could she encounter this rumored lunatic? Charlotte pretended to admire the painting. She asked Elian if she was interested in selling it to her. Unexpectedly, Elian flatly refused. Because in Elian's view, Charlotte didn't really want to buy it, but was offering charity and pity. Charlotte also realized her unintentional act had hurt Elian's fragile self-esteem. It seems you've misunderstood. My name is Charlotte in your eyes. Am I the kind of person who helps others out of sympathy? Elian was intimidated by Charlotte's powerful aura. She couldn't help but shrink back. Charlotte directly grabbed Elian's hand. She pulled her up from the ground. You paint very well. I think good paintings shouldn't be buried. Only then did Elian let down her guard. After returning home, Charlotte was still thinking about her little one. Little did she know that Callies was also worried about this. To coax the little one to sleep, Callies had already changed 88 fairy tale books, but the little one kept refusing Callies reading him fairy tales. Callies still said gently, "Then I'll just stay by your side until you fall asleep." The little one hesitated, worried that Callies would be tired because of this. Callies expressed that he was more than willing. "Doing anything for you won't tire me out." Only then did the little one fall asleep peacefully. Callies didn't understand how could such a cautious child as his nephew come to the Grand Duke's mansion alone. Moreover, when they first met, Sass kept repeating that he came alone as if hiding something. At this moment, Sass seemed to be having a very sad dream. Tears fell continuously and he kept sobbing. Callies leaned closer to hear clearly. This little one was actually calling Charlotte's name in his dream. A woman accidentally saved a little one who turned out to be the wandering little prince. However, this was all part of the little one's scheme. It was to bring home an aunt for himself. The woman's name was Charlotte, the only daughter of Duke Lienta. But since she first saw Grand Duke Calix, she became pathologically obsessed with this man. From then on, she became a psychotic stalker of His Highness, the Grand Duke. When she learned of the male lead's public relationship, she constantly wanted to put the woman to death. In the end, she was executed instead and died miserably. This was the ending of the Villainess in the novel. When Charlotte realized she had transmigrated into the evil woman in the novel, Charlotte immediately wrote an apology letter to the Grand Duke. To avoid the fate of future execution, she decided to retreat to the mountains. However, the leisurely countryside life only lasted for 3 days. She was forcibly summoned back by her father's letter. On the way back, Charlotte saw several young hooligans bullying a little boy. That tearful little face looked particularly pitiful. After thinking for 999 seconds, Charlotte still ordered the coachman to stop. In the blink of an eye, she knocked down the young hooligans. Then she domineeringly reached out to the little one, "You're coming home with me." However, once they got home, everyone led by her father was shocked. Her father trembled, unwilling to accept the fact that he had become a grandfather without knowing. Charlotte didn't hide her disdain for her father. "You gave birth to such a big dumpling in a year? Let me see." Grand Duke Lienta then smiled happily. That's good, that's good." But the old man always felt that this little dumpling looked strangely familiar. Charlotte then asked about the reason her father called her back. It turned out that the crown prince, who had been missing for 7 years, was actually still alive. He just hadn't been found yet. Moreover, Grand Duke Calix had also learned the news and was frantically searching. Charlotte, while holding the little one in her arms, reviewed the original plot. In the novel, the crown prince was found and brought to Grand Duke Calix by the female lead. But the crown prince was the female lead's little follower, unable to leave her side. Helplessly, the female lead stayed at the Grand Duke's mansion. Then came the cliché plot: the two fell in love as time passed. Thinking of this, Charlotte thought to herself that it wouldn't be bad to retreat to the mountains after they found the crown prince. But what did this have to do with calling her back? After her father stammered for a long time, Charlotte finally understood. He called her back because he was afraid this stalker would cause trouble. He wanted to keep her by his side to prevent Charlotte from going crazy outside looking for the little one. After all, her status as the Grand Duke's #1 crazy fan was well known. It was fine, as Charlotte didn't plan to join the commotion anyway. Then she prepared to take the little dumpling for a bath. "When will you be able to find a crown prince?" Her father sighed helplessly. "It's hard to say. After all, black hair and blue eyes aren't common." The next second her father turned to stone. Wait a minute. This 7-year-old boy with black hair and blue eyes was right in front of them. They both realized it then. The father and daughter wished they could die on the spot. Charlotte couldn't believe it. She had casually picked up the crown prince. After settling the little dumpling, the father and daughter began to brainwash themselves that this surely wasn't the crown prince. Unable to bear it anymore, her father actually wanted Charlotte to throw him back where she found him. Charlotte exclaimed, "Mom, listen to yourself. Is that something a human would say? He's just a child." But her father believed that if Charlotte sent the crown prince to the Grand Duke's mansion, she would surely be misunderstood. Charlotte also agreed. At that time, it wouldn't be just a simple misunderstanding. They might even think she had kidnapped the new crown prince. Moreover, this was the opportunity for the female lead and male lead to meet in the original story. If she brought him over now, wouldn't the plot be ruined? Maybe she should secretly drop him off at the female lead's doorstep. At this moment, a little head peeked out from the door. It was the freshly bathed little dumpling. The little dumpling walked up to Charlotte and gave a 180-degree bow. "I'm truly grateful to you." Lady Charlotte then blinking his clear and innocent big eyes. "May I call you Lady Charlotte? You're the first person who's been so kind to me, I will never forget you." As he finished speaking, the little dumpling's whole body seemed to radiate a golden light, but only Charlotte knew that this was originally meant to be said to the female lad. Charlotte suddenly felt uneasy. Her plan for a quiet life might be ruined because of this. The scene changes and the family of three appears at the dining table. Watching the little dumpling's eating manners, Charlotte couldn't help but feel embarrassed. How long had he been starving? Charlotte then noticed the beauty mark on the little dumpling's right cheek, because in the novel, this mole was described in about 500 words. In the novel, this little dumpling was supposed to inherit the throne, but an accident occurred the day before his coronation, and he passed away with the former empress. As for the throne, it was seized by the former emperor's half-brother. Now with the little prince's appearance, the current emperor might even have to advocate. The emperor naturally knew this as well, so if he knew the little prince was still alive, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Therefore, sending him to Grand Duke Alice would indeed be safer. But if she sent him herself, wouldn't it interfere with the male and female lady's encounter? At this moment, the Duke suddenly had a stomachache, saying he needed to find medicine. He hurriedly left the place. Charlotte knew her father's stomach pain had started again due to stress. The sensitive little dumpling, watching the Duke's retreating figure, became very dejected. His eyes filled with tears, wondering if the Duke disliked him for being a wild child. So seeing him made the Duke lose his appetite. Just like before when people saw him and said he ruined their appetite. Hearing this, Charlotte instantly flared up. She transformed into a white-haired witch, fiercely asking who said that. However, the little dumpling was still very sad. Knowing words couldn't comfort him, Charlotte directly picked up the little dumpling, believing that no one could escape the magic of being lifted high. Then she hugged the little one close, saying, "You know you're very cute. The kind that just looking at makes people happy." The little dumpling blinked his big eyes and asked, "Really?" Charlotte showed a reassuring smile. Of course, seeing the little dumpling's mood stabilize, Charlotte then told him that he actually had an uncle. Then she changed the subject. "Do you think my house is big? Your home is even bigger than this. I'll take you there tomorrow. I believe your uncle will love you very much." The little dumpling understood that he was going to be sent away. Sadly, he asked Charlotte, "Do I have to go to that uncle's house?" Charlotte thought he was afraid, so she comforted him. Although he might give a bad first impression, he's actually a very good person. But she saw a teary-eyed little dumpling instead. Charlotte cursed herself, wondering what was wrong now. The little dumpling cried, "Does that mean I won't see you anymore?" She could only explain, "Your uncle is very nice. You'll definitely be happier with him than you are now." Charlotte was speechless. She couldn't possibly say, "I used to be a crazy stalker obsessed with your uncle." The little dumpling hugged Charlotte tightly. Pleadingly, he said, "But I don't want to leave you because there's no one better than you in this world." Charlotte didn't know how to respond. In the original plot, the little dumpling also clung tightly to the female lead who first saved him. But if this continues, wouldn't the male lead misunderstand her more and more? At this point, there was no other choice. Charlotte could only compromise, promising to visit him whenever she had time. But only occasionally, only then did the little dumpling stop crying. "But you have to promise me one thing." The next day, the mission was accomplished. Callies had been searching for the little prince tirelessly, his handsome face showing signs of fatigue. His subordinates reported helplessly that although they found 3 children matching the characteristics, none of them reacted to the mole test. Charlize was exhausted. They had been searching for a week with no progress. A terrible thought occurred to his subordinate. Could it be that the emperor had already made his move? Although there was no evidence to confirm it now, the emperor's side must also be very anxious. After all, if he hadn't died in 5 years and in this situation, if the former emperor's son with more right to inherit the throne appeared, then his throne would be in danger. The subordinate also agreed, because he knew best how he had ascended to the throne through improper means back then. But Charlize had no time to care about these things now. Whether his brother's child was alive was the most important thing. After all, this was his only wish. Charlize prayed silently, please let that child be alive and safe. He could give anything to the person who could bring him back safely. Meanwhile, a carriage was on its way to the Grand Duke's mansion. The child saved by the woman herself was also the child she cherished in her palm. But now the child was critically ill, yet the woman was unwilling to see him again. Actually, when Charlotte learned that Sass was sick, she knew it was the divine manifestation fever. This was a type of typhoid that afflicted the victorious royal family when they formed a contract with the divine beast. But because the empire's victory had long been weakening, the divine manifestation fever hadn't appeared for a long time. The news of Sass's illness quickly spread throughout the empire, becoming a topic of conversation for everyone. Charlotte took this opportunity to screen out who were enemies. But no matter how much reward the Grand Duke's mansion offered, Sass's condition still couldn't improve. The frustrated Charlotte began running around in the courtyard. Now Charlotte could only pin her hopes on the divine beast. However, Charlotte had only run 2 laps when she started feeling dizzy. It felt like she was about to meet timeshare in the next second. Liz couldn't help but sigh, this body's foundation was really poor. She wondered if she could survive until the grand finale. Noah saw Charlotte stop, he thoughtfully handed her a towel. Charlotte reached out with her still blue-tinted paw, tremblingly taking the towel while complaining about how tired she was. Noah suddenly became melancholic, so the young lady still didn't trust him. From Noah's perspective, Charlotte had always finished running the training ground with ease. In fact, at that time, Charlotte already felt like she was about to collapse. Noah felt even more upset. The young lady just didn't trust him. Charlotte was speechless. She dared not look at Noah's watery eyes anymore. But suddenly she realized that in the vast training ground there were no other knights in sight. She immediately imagined scenes of Noah being bullied. Looking at Noah's expression, she felt more sympathy. If anyone bullies you, remember to come and tell me. Then, exhausted, she decided to end today's training. Shakily pushing open the door, she silently vowed to rest well for a few days. However, plans can't keep up with changes. Charlotte appeared in the temple square the next day. It was all because of this gray stone in her hand, and this stone was the light divine beast. After being chased away by Charlotte, the light divine beast immediately went to find Sass, but it was unexpectedly absorbed by the sacred object guarding Sass, turning into a small stone. It could only come back to seek Charlotte's help. Originally, Charlotte thought about placing the divine beast in the goddess statue's hand to steal faith power. But the active skill of the conspicuous package forced her to give up. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she bumped into Calix. But when she made eye contact with Calix, her precognitive ability activated again. The bright moon overlooked the earth. The item to treat the divine manifestation fever was finally found. Charlotte knew whose hands the sacred object to relieve the divine manifestation fever came from. It was the Empire's collection maniac, Count Caro, although she knew the sacred object would be found eventually. If the search took too long, would SAS be able to hold on? Charlotte suddenly startled. Originally, SAS's divine manifestation fever should have appeared a month later. When did the original plot change so much? Seeing Charlotte still in the daze, Callies couldn't help but speak. Every time you look at me, you seem to know everything, so you noticed it very early. Charlotte knew if she stayed any longer, she would definitely give herself away. So she wanted to find an excuse to leave, but Callies insisted on seeing Charlotte to her carriage. He said he had something to tell Charlotte. Actually, Callies was still struggling with what Charlotte had said to him last time in the palace. He didn't understand. Charlotte clearly loved Sass very much. Why did she insist on keeping her distance from Sass? Charlotte pursed her lips in silence. She knew that protecting Sass was just an excuse. And all of this stemmed from her own cowardice, because her incompetence in her previous life constantly reminded her that she had no ability to protect anyone. It was also because in this life, she had a father who loved her so much, alien who depended on her. And everything she possessed in this life, it made her feel like she was walking on thin ice. But thinking of Sass, her heart softened involuntarily. She really missed Sass. Unknowingly, the sun was setting. Soft sunlight poured through the window. Charlotte finally couldn't resist the longing in her heart. Seeing Sass constantly calling for her even in his pain, Charlotte felt her heart being torn apart. She prayed incessantly, begging heaven to let this child with such a difficult fate grow up healthy. As if hearing Charlotte's call, Sass, who had been unconscious for days, suddenly woke up. Seeing Charlotte before him, Sass's eyes immediately filled with tears. But hearing Sass's calls, Charlotte hurriedly fled the scene. Charlotte finally shed her inner demons, facing her own weakness. She tightly embraced the child, crying uncontrollably, but for a moment facing the child's repeated calls. Charlotte instinctively wanted to run away. The memories of her previous life stabbed into Charlotte's heart like knives. She still couldn't forget how her parents sold her for a few pieces of silver. Nor could she forget their happy faces when they got the money, but she still believed their lies that they would come back for her. From then on, the nightmare began. She was sold to a professional assassination guild, the training that was famously cruel. The survival rate of trainees was less than 1%. Even though Charlotte struggled to survive, she was abused for not wanting to kill. Insults were a daily occurrence. Just when she thought her miserable life was about to end, someone stepped forward, willing to take her in. Charlotte was attracted by the man's gentle smile. He didn't care even when his decision was criticized by others. For a moment, Charlotte felt he was the salvation sent by heaven. She weakly thanked the man for being willing to take in a burden like her. But her heart was incredibly determined. To repay this man's kindness, she had to become strong. So in just 2 years, countless people died by Charlotte's hands. Their cooperation became increasingly tacit. Spending time together also made Charlotte trust the man more. She even developed the idea that she could die for the man. Ironically, when she actually took a fatal blow for the man's cold gaze made her soul tremble. It turned out that the man only saw Charlotte as a means to an end. The reason his mission completion rate ranked first was because he used this method, making countless people willing to take the bullet for him, then discarding them like trash in the end, and this time was no exception. Although Charlotte was reborn, her heart had died along with her previous life. But now, looking at Sass's falling tears, it was like lava searing her heart. Charlotte felt that this life was too unreal. Perhaps heaven pitied her and gave her a chance to start over. Charlotte stroked Sass's little head. "Where am I, Charlotte?" Sass, feverish, was still begging Charlotte not to leave. Each word of longing dispersed the gloom, shrouding Charlotte's heart. She finally couldn't help but tightly embrace Sass, promising over and over that she wouldn't leave again. Charlotte seemed to be the cure for Sass. Because of Charlotte's arrival, Sass also became much more spirited. Charlotte gently wiped away Sass's tears, apologizing for her own cowardice. Sass excitedly showed off the ring Charlotte had given her, saying she would wear it every day. Seeing the well-preserved ring, she knew how much Sass loved her. But Sass said that Charlotte wasn't just her favorite, but also her most important friend. And ever since the Grand Princess returned, Charlotte had been radiating confidence. As if reborn, she confidently stated that her current self could make 100,000 more friends. However, reality slapped her in the face. If 3 women make a play, then she must be performing a monologue. Unexpectedly, the topic of the 2 best friends always revolved around Charlotte. Endlessly praising Charlotte, Charlotte was also immersed in their flattery, completely forgetting the point of calling them here. But Roger remembered an important piece of intelligence. That is, the Queen's father, Marquis Ronald, was critically ill. Charlotte was stunned to hear this. She didn't expect the plot to advance again in such a short time, because according to the original story, if Marquis Ronald was in trouble, the next one would be Lady Biddy. On the other side, the Queen also learned of the Crown Prince's serious illness. The Queen immediately suspected that Sass had contracted the divine fever. If Sass truly formed a contract with the divine beast, coupled with Sass's pure bloodline, this made her feel her position was precarious. So she immediately ordered to speed up the control over Lady Biddy, wanting to use the kind-hearted one as an evil blade to eliminate the threat for herself. The woman finally stopped running away, choosing to face her inner self, and the news of Sass's serious illness had already spread throughout the country. As clever as the Queen was, she would surely guess that Sass's illness was the divine fever. Combined with Sass's pure bloodline, the Queen would surely speed up her control over the Empire's forbidden areas. So Charlotte must quickly find a sacred object to cure the divine fever and completely heal Sass. Charlotte anxiously pondered her next move. At this moment, Ilian pulled out an invitation, with a shy demeanor that made Charlotte break out in a cold sweat. It turned out that with Charlotte's support, Ilian had now gained some fame. So she planned to hold her first solo exhibition and hoped Charlotte could attend to boost her prestige. The socially anxious Charlotte wanted to refuse, but then heard that the Collector Duke would also be there. So the next second, Charlotte appeared at the exhibition dressed in a kidney-shaped outfit. Her girlfriends suddenly started chatting about how Charlotte's brooch at the recent auction sold for an unprecedented high price. Hearing this, Charlotte was so embarrassed she could dig a hole to hide in, because that record-breaking high price was bid by her own father, who had been excitedly seeking praise for it at the time. Charlotte could only reluctantly praise her father, who claimed he raised the price twofold to prevent his daughter's work from falling into others' hands. Charlotte was instantly stunned, so her carefully planned scheme to fleece a sucker ended up backfiring on herself. Charlotte felt a bit of pain in her chest. As the party neared its end, Count Descartes still hadn't arrived. Charlotte had no choice but to leave empty-handed and make long-term plans. The next day, Charlotte went directly to an orphanage she had previously supported. Using the excuse of checking if the donated funds were properly used, she sought Count Descartes' wish. Seeing the orphanage she supported looking renewed and harmonious, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Charlotte remembered that in the original story, the reason the Count became a collector was because his daughter and son-in-law died in an accident. Even his grandson went missing due to that accident. Lost in thought, she was suddenly hit by a small child's sudden charge. Looking at the crying child with brown hair and black eyes, Charlotte was stunned. This matched exactly the description in the original story. Her luck was unexpectedly good. After some inquiry, she learned that this child had only been at the orphanage for about a month. Charlotte saw the pendant on the child's neck and became even more certain because the pendant contained a portrait of the Count's daughter. This was why the Count began frantically collecting various items. His goal was to one day receive or obtain news about this pendant and thus follow the clues to find his grandson. But she couldn't take him back directly now. Charlotte worried that the Queen's spies might be here too, which could bring harm to the child. Just as she was about to put the child down, the little one suddenly reached back and grabbed Charlotte's collar. This almost made Charlotte choke on the spot. The caretaker frantically tried to pull him away, but the kid just babbled and refused to let go. In the end, Charlotte compromised and continued holding the little one. After the caretaker explained, Charlotte learned that this little one liked shiny things, which was why he didn't want to leave. Charlotte also discovered that the little one couldn't speak normally. It was likely due to childhood psychological trauma that led to the loss of language ability. After careful consideration, Charlotte decided to take the child back to her mansion. The orphanage manager instantly felt that Charlotte was beautiful, kind-hearted, and of high character. She immediately turned into a fangirl, seeing them off. However, in the corner, a black-haired boy was silently observing Charlotte's every move. He was originally the only daughter of the Empire's most renowned Count family, but due to an accident, he became an orphan overnight. He was also victimized by malicious relatives who forged a will, attempting to seize the inheritance left by his parents, even taking it to court. Unexpectedly, the other party accused first, not only giving a tearful performance in court, but also continuously slandering Roger. Just as the judge was about to rule in favor of the malicious relatives, Charlotte descended upon the court, vowing to seek justice for her friend. "I swear on the honor of the Lienta ducal family, the will is forged." Her righteous words made the malicious relatives tremble. Fearing exposure, they insisted Charlotte was giving false testimony. Charlotte calmly presented evidence, wanting to verify the authenticity of the will. It only needed to be compared with previous notes to know the truth. Without a doubt, the scales of victory tipped towards Roger. After everything was over, Roger was as happy as a 200 kg child, hugging Charlotte's hand, constantly thanking her, completely falling at Charlotte's feet. After expressing gratitude, Roger had to complete the inheritance and subsequent work, so he reluctantly left. Charlotte finally breathed a sigh of relief despite appearing calm now. She had almost stuttered from nervousness when summoning witnesses earlier. Just as Charlotte was about to leave, she was stopped by someone. Surprisingly, it was the long-missing Marquis Bernardo. "Miss, I come on behalf of the Queen. The contraband merchant has been sentenced to death. Also, I personally inform you of some news. Be careful during the upcoming hunting season." After saying this, he bowed and left. Charlotte was startled. She didn't expect the Queen to be so brazen as to openly warn her. After returning home, Charlotte absent-mindedly arranged for Noah to deliver supplies to the orphanage. After confirming that the brown-haired little one's condition was gradually improving, the butler handed over a letter from Duke Bayer. He learned that the young master of their family was seriously ill and hoped Charlotte could visit. This young master was the little ringleader who had bullied Sass before. Charlotte knew this must also be the Queen's doing. She just didn't expect the Queen's plot to be so thoroughly exposed. So she decided to go to Duke Bayer's mansion immediately. The reason Duke Bayer sought Charlotte was because he had heard that Charlotte possessed an amazing discerning eye. He wanted to ask Charlotte to help find cursed objects in the mansion, although Bayer wasn't sure if Charlotte really had such ability. His love for his son made him willing to take a gamble. What he didn't expect was that as soon as Charlotte entered Lucas's study, she sensed something unusual. Even Charlotte herself was shocked. She didn't understand why she could even see curses. The source of the anomaly was coming from an exquisite music box. Unexpectedly, the next second, Charlotte's seizure suddenly struck. She knocked over the items on the table along with the music box. She even stepped on them twice. This frightened the Duke, who frantically sent telegrams. He hurriedly ordered the servants beside him to check if his son's condition had worsened. Turning back, he said fiercely, "You'll regret your arrogance." Seeing only the two of them left in the room, Charlotte no longer concealed. "Don't worry, it's just an ordinary curse. Moreover, for the cursed object to enter the Duke's mansion so easily, there must be an insider." Then she asked the Duke to think carefully about who sent the music box. The Duke thought for a moment. "It's from the Funberg Count's family." What he didn't expect was that the Queen's plot, a collateral branch of Grand Duke Calix, was already clear his day. Meanwhile, the servants rushed to the young master's room with the doctor. After learning that Lucas's condition hadn't worsened, they hurried back to report. The first thing Lucas did when he woke up was worry if his mother was still angry. Unexpectedly, the doctor said that the Duke was not only still angry, but even declared, "You are the shame of the Bayer family, so please die quickly, young master." She was the vicious and obsessive villainous supporting character, but now she was passionate about helping the homeless. Not only did she pick up the former prince who was wandering outside and bring him to the Duke's mansion, but while volunteering at the orphanage, she also rescued the orphan of the Count's family. After resolving the curse at Duke Bayer's mansion, Charlotte prepared to leave, but there was one thing Charlotte couldn't understand. In the original story, Callies was very good at obtaining information, but why did she always fail to find a sacred object to cure the divine manifestation fever? Now she thought it must be Duke Bayer who interfered. After all, the item that caused the curse on Duke Bayer's young son was a gift from Grand Duke Callies' collateral branch. But anyone could guess who the mastermind behind it was. However, Charlotte now had more important matters to attend to. Because of Count de Caro's collecting habit, his whereabouts were very easy to track. He would visit an art gallery every 2 weeks. But since Count de Caro was secretly searching for his missing grandson without the royal family's knowledge, Charlotte couldn't directly knock on the Count's door. She could only come to the art gallery to create a chance encounter. Moreover, the royal family might already know that de Caro possessed the sacred object to treat the divine manifestation fever. After locating Count de Caro, Charlotte and Noah began to act. They pretended to casually mention the thumb-sized portrait they had recently acquired. Sure enough, upon hearing about the thumb-sized portrait, Count de Caro's body suddenly shook. The next second, he eagerly introduced himself on de Caro. "May I see the painting you mentioned?" Charlotte, however, pretended to be reluctant and refused. "That painting is too small. I didn't bring it with me." Count de Caro was very eager and asked Charlotte to describe the thumb-size painting. Charlotte then seized the opportunity to suggest, "Since the Count is so interested, why don't we set a time to discuss it at your mansion?" But 3 days had passed since meeting Charlotte at the art gallery. During these 3 days, Charlotte still hadn't given any news. Count de Caro was already pacing anxiously in his mansion. Just as the Count's patience was about to run out, a servant informed him that Anta's carriage had arrived at the door. De Caro eagerly opened the door, seeing the child in Charlotte's arms. De Caro couldn't hide his shock. Looking at the all-too-familiar hair, color, and eyes, he trembled with excitement. "Is the painting on this child?" Charlotte then opened the brown-haired child's necklace box. Seeing the portrait in the necklace clearly, de Caro finally couldn't hold back. He stretched out his trembling hands, hugging the little one into his arms. "Child, I've finally found you." Watching the grandfather and grandson reunite, Charlotte was also very pleased. To repay Charlotte, de Caro promised to let her enter his collection room and choose any item she liked. Charlotte outwardly expressed embarrassment, but inside she was overjoyed. As soon as she entered the collection room, Charlotte discovered the sacred object to treat the divine manifestation fever. But to avoid suspicion, besides the pendant to treat the divine manifestation fever, she also chose 2 other ornaments, worried about Sass's condition. Charlotte didn't want to linger too long, but as she was about to leave, the brown-haired child babbled, calling out to Charlotte. He reached out his little hands, reluctant to let Charlotte go. Originally, she had taken him from the orphanage because she knew the child's identity and knew that if she let Zack and de Caro successfully reunite, she would certainly get what she wanted. But the children's pure emotions made Charlotte feel guilty. Charlotte held Zack's little hand, sincerely praying that his future would be filled with warmth and no more darkness. Meanwhile, in the Grand Duke's mansion, Callies was worrying about how to obtain the sacred object from Count de Caro. Just then, Charlotte arrived with the sacred object. Seeing the intact sacred object, Callies knew how difficult this had been. This should have been something he, as the uncle, should have done. But he had been constrained by the curse on young Bayer. Moreover, from what he knew, Daikaro treasured his collections and wouldn't easily give them away. Charlotte must have gone to great lengths. Callies, unable to hide his excitement, said, "I owe you too much. Please let me do something for you, anything at all." Looking at Callies' radiating golden light, Charlotte felt speechless. The wish Callies had promised last time hadn't been used yet. Now the number of uses increased again. This was like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Charlotte couldn't help but smirk smugly. Callies, without mind-reading abilities, thought Charlotte was struggling to decide on a wish. But Charlotte suddenly realized that, whether it was Sass's divine fever or young Bayer's curse, both happened much earlier than in the original timeline. It was hard to guarantee that the Empress wouldn't make a move against Sass earlier, combined with Bernardo's warning. Now wasn't the time for her to do as she pleased with the wish scroll, so Charlotte unhesitatingly made her first wish. It was that if anything happened during the hunting season, protecting Sass must be the top priority. Callies was stunned for a moment. He had thought Charlotte would be more demanding. In the end, he could only smile helplessly and say, "All right, I understand." However, he couldn't help but remind Charlotte that the Empress might already know about his recent whereabouts. Charlotte might have a tough battle ahead soon. Sure enough, Charlotte soon received an invitation for a one-on-one tea party with the Empress. The Empress kept probing indirectly, asking about why Duke Bayer and Count de Caro had sought out Charlotte. Charlotte kept playing dumb, constantly complaining about how busy she was sponsoring the orphanage. Not only donating money, but also personally sending the little brats home. Her soul-deep acting even confused the Empress. It seemed a bit off, but also somehow made sense, because she couldn't plan a spy in the Rihanna family. The Empress had no choice but to believe Charlotte's tearful performance. Unable to get useful information, the Empress hastily dismissed her. After Charlotte left, the Empress's demeanor changed to a sinister one. Since she couldn't get any clues from Charlotte, she had to change her plan. Come to think of it, she hadn't chatted with Lady in a while. Time quickly arrived at the hunting season. All nobles of the Empire were invited. Happily, Sass had recovered, and because she broke young Bayer's curse, she unexpectedly became close friends with Duke Bayer. All these efforts were worth it. Now the Emperor and Empress's entrance marked the beginning of the main event. He was originally a prince lost outside the palace. After countless hardships, he returned to the palace. He thought he had passed the test successfully and could reclaim everything that belonged to him. But the Emperor, who rose to power through vicious means, would never allow him to live. This hunting season was Sass's first official public appearance as the heir. Charlotte didn't believe the Emperor and Empress wouldn't have any plans. Watching the Emperor pretend to be noble and kind, speaking grandiose words, made Charlotte extremely disgusted. Hunting was also a competition for knights. According to custom, the first place would receive the Emperor's, but the Emperor specifically gave the right of commendation to Sass. This sudden change made Charlotte's heart pound. Even with Callis' utmost protection, it was difficult to prevent the Emperor and Empress from extending their evil hands towards Sass. The naive Sass, not wanting to trouble her uncle, agreed to give the commendation. Seeing their plans succeed, the vicious couple pretended to be delighted and invited Sass on stage. An attendant presented a box containing the medal, claiming it was a rare sacred object. If not bestowed by a royal descendant, it would attack the person. Then they urged Sass to open it. The innocent Sass obediently prepared to open the box, but the moment she touched the box, it suddenly shattered. Then a golden light burst forth. A huge explosion sounded and thick smoke instantly engulfed the entire square. The immense power terrified the nobles present. Wasn't it said that only royalty could touch it? Why did it still explode? Everyone speculated. Could it be that the child wasn't the true heir? As the smoke cleared, Charlotte was seen tightly protecting Sass, lying on the ground. It turned out that Charlotte, having anticipated this, rushed to the tower at the moment of the explosion. However, due to the massive impact of the explosion, Sass still fainted. Callis, who witnessed everything, could no longer contain his rage. He wanted nothing more than to kill those two power-hungry bastards right now. Although Ilian was equally furious, he could only try his best to dissuade Callis from acting rashly. Now is not the time to stand out, because if he tried to exonerate Sass, he would certainly be charged with treason. Callis finally understood what Charlotte meant by her wish earlier. Charlotte seemed to have known everything in advance, but he hadn't taken it seriously. Now that this situation had occurred, nobles would inevitably question Prince Sass's identity. Sure enough, the Emperor was the first to attack. This child was actually rejected by the sacred object. If he were the real crown prince, how could this happen? Not giving Charlotte a chance to explain, someone eagerly wanted to convict the two. Baron Pina's face showed uncontrollable excitement. Your Majesty, please imprison them for contempt of the royal family. Seeing his precious daughter being bullied, her father was enraged. Ain't nobody without even a title dares to convict a woman of the Rihanna family. The man who had kicked an iron plate was instantly frightened. Are you planning to use your right of pardon to exempt your daughter from punishment? Charlotte suddenly realized. It seemed they weren't just targeting Sass, but also wanted to use this opportunity to seize her father's right of pardon, even to uproot the entire Rihanna family. The emperor with impure bloodline had no way to restrain the Rihanna family, not only because Duke Rihanna was a founding contributor, but also because in that battle concerning the empire's survival, it was due to her father's fierce resistance that they achieved victory. Thus, he was granted the right of pardon by the previous emperor, equivalent to a get-out-of jail-free card. Charlotte hadn't expected the Empress' ambition to be so great. If they succeeded, there would be no one left in the empire to restrain them. I didn't lie about the crown prince's matter. The man who was trembling before Duke Rienta just moments ago regained his arrogant demeanor upon seeing it was Charlotte speaking. Miss, didn't you see the sacred object's rejection reaction just now? How do you explain that? Charlotte didn't intend to address the religious aspect, instead directly expressing her request to the emperor and empress. Please give me time to prove all this. The emperor seemed thoughtful. Actually, I also want to believe in the Rihanna family's loyalty. Then she pretended to be magnanimous and persuaded the emperor. Why don't we give them a week to prove themselves? I believe there must be some misunderstanding. It seemed like she was pleading, but her vicious expression had already betrayed her. The emperors dared to give Charlotte time because she was confident Charlotte couldn't find evidence. With the empress speaking up, the emperor naturally granted Charlotte's request. However, during this period, Charlotte must be placed on her house arrest. But Calix argued that she shouldn't be confined in the duke's mansion. What if Duke Rienta, out of love for his daughter, played tricks that would affect the prince's reputation? It would be better to confine her in the palace. If the identity of the crown prince is indeed false, I will personally deal with Miss Charlotte. Charlotte knew this was to protect her and Sass. Only this way could prevent the emperors from interfering. Under the consideration of the Duke, Calix, and Duke Rienda's influence, the emperor could only allow Charlotte to return to the duke's mansion under house arrest. On the way, she encountered Rebetti and his brother. Charlotte asked if she could say a few words to those two. Calix glanced at the royal family behind him and reminded Charlotte to keep it brief. Charlotte pretended to be happy and expressed gratitude to young Master Ronald. Thank you for the gift you sent last time. I really liked it. The man, however, evaded. I don't understand what you're talking about. Of course, it's the sacred object you wanted great lengths to find, the one that can test royal identity. I was very impressed by its power, but I will certainly find evidence to return the favor. After returning to the mansion, young Master Ronald still didn't understand how Charlotte knew about the sacred object. He even blamed Rebetti. If you had done it from the beginning, we wouldn't have been discovered. It turned out that after meeting with the Empress before the hunting season, Charlotte had arranged to meet Rebetti. She lied to get rid of Rebetti, and the task was simple. Just give this box to Baron Pina during the hunting season. She promised Rebetti that if he completed this task, she would treat his seriously ill father. This was indeed a reason Rebetti couldn't refuse, so he took the box back to the mansion. But on the day of the hunting season, Roberty felt uneasy. He felt that this box wasn't as simple as the Empress had said. While hesitating, he encountered his brother. So he discussed the matter with his brother. Because after the Marquis father fell seriously ill, the family's status plummeted. So Roberty's brother had always wanted to please the royal family to strengthen himself. So, ignoring Roberty's warning, he gave the box to young Pina. Unexpectedly, because of that box, Prince Sass's identity was questioned. Even now, facing Roberty's accusations, he still didn't feel he had done anything wrong. Instead, he believed that by helping the emperor identify the fake prince, the emperor should be grateful to their family and make them as allies. To prevent Roberty from revealing the inside story to Charlotte, he even placed Roberty under house arrest and the mansion. Roberty came to his father's bedside, constantly repenting why things had developed this way. If he hadn't brought that box back, would none of this have happened? Unwilling to be someone else's wife, Roberty was determined to find out who was behind all this. Only then could everything return to normal. In the emperor's palace, clothes were scattered everywhere, but they weren't the emperor and empresses. The empress was having an affair. That person laughed. It seems the daughter of Duke Rienta is truly mad for Calix. I can't believe she actually brought an imposter and has been acting all this time. The Empress, while taking out a bottle of medicine, said, the more so, the more you need to consolidate your throne. We must conceive an heir as soon as possible. The man took the medicine bottle. I don't know why, but today I have a very good feeling. I hope you can bring good news next time we're together. The Empress watched him with satisfaction as he gulped down the potion. Soon after, the man fell asleep. The Empress calmly got up, muttering, if you knew the true power of the sacred object, you probably wouldn't be so happy. I thought the royal family's divine power had completely disappeared. If I let my guard down, something terrible could have happened. But thanks to that foolish emperor, the prince was smoothly doubted according to plan. When the child collapsed, the dupe didn't react at all. It seems he only views the prince as a tool. I must get rid of him before the prince's divine power fully awakens. Next, I just need to wait until I give birth to a prince. Then I can dispose of the emperor too. It would be best to eliminate Elwydin, Lienta, and that utterly detestable Linex, root and stem. I will ensure that noble bloodlines no longer exist in this empire, the Empress muttered to herself. I must pray that the Duke's daughter doesn't cause any trouble for me. Meanwhile, in the Grand Palace, Sass lay quietly. His body trembled as he mumbled in his sleep. A questioning voice appeared in his mind. The noble young lady actually cherishes you. Don't you find it strange? The reason she's so good to you is because you're a prince. Without being a prince, you're worthless. Sass shook his head in denial. No, that's not true. Lady Charlotte took my hand even before I found my family. The sarcastic voice still wouldn't leave Sass alone. You don't have that kind of value. Who would love you if you weren't a prince? Don't you also think you're not the real prince? Suddenly waking up, Sass was frightened to tears, his eyes brimming. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes, unable to hold back his sobs. After a while, he looked around and realized it was just a dream, not real. He couldn't help but whisper, I wish everything that happened during the hunting season was just a dream. Seeing the toys scattered on the floor, he wondered, could it be that the accident happened because I'm not of royal blood? When His Majesty the Emperor touched that box, nothing happened at all. Until now, I've taken things that should have belonged to the real prince. Sass clasped his hands tightly, the unbelievably kind uncle and Libin who looked at me warmly. I should return them all to the real prince. I shouldn't be greedy. I should be grateful for the kindness shown to me during this time. But just then, with the click, the door opened. Seeing Sass awake, Charlotte was delighted. She immediately asked if he was feeling better and if anything still hurt. She had been worried when Sass wouldn't wake up. She advised him to rest well until he fully recovered. In response to Charlotte's concern, Sass' tears flowed uncontrollably. She's the only one who took my hand before I became a prince. I should be able to cherish my memories with her, right? Sass apologized between sobs, saying he wasn't the real prince but didn't want to lose her, admitting he had become greedy without meaning to. Charlotte raised her hand, gently wiping away Sass's tears, smiling. She told him it wasn't greed and that they were already good friends. So it didn't matter if Sass wasn't the prince. We can live together in Lienta when the time comes. Sass, we won't lose anything. They hugged each other tightly. Nothing could separate them. Meanwhile, Duke Lienta also received a letter from Charlotte. He knew his father had been worried about him and waiting for news, so he wrote this letter. The letter mentioned that he and His Highness, the Prince, were very healthy and that the Grand Duke was taking good care of them. He reassured himself that he would definitely prove Sass was the real prince. He hoped his father could wait patiently. During this time staying at the Grand Palace, he would find a way. He would write to his father again after some time. He hoped his father wouldn't worry and would take care of himself. At the Grand Palace, Charlotte and the Grand Duke were discussing strategies. Because of what happened during the hunting season, the nobles' suspicions were growing day by day. They even began to doubt that magical artifact used to identify royal bloodlines. Even so, Calix still firmly believed that Sass was his nephew. After all, he looked exactly like his older brother. Charlotte agreed with him. Sass couldn't possibly not be the prince. However, one thing was strange. Why did the sacred object react to Sass that way? It's also possible that the royal family deceived the public about the sacred object's function. I recently received intelligence saying that the Empress obtained a sacred object used to confirm divine victory. If the person in charge of the sacred object is the Empress confidant, then everything would make sense. Perhaps the Empress wanted to confirm whether Sass really had the divine manifestation fever. After all, once one has the divine manifestation fever, divine victory will appear. Calix thought the same. Regarding divine victory, Charlotte thought they should carefully consider how to publicly reveal the purpose of that sacred object. Duke's daughter, don't worry too much. I can't always rely on your help. You should go upstairs and rest. Charlotte wanted to refuse. She needed to quickly come up with a way to prove Sass's identity as the prince. Just as she was about to grab the Grand Duke's clothes, a strange scene appeared again. A flash in her mind. Suddenly, a figure appeared before her eyes, accompanied by a voice. How can you find a way to distinguish the true prince in just one short week? It's just giving people unrealistic hope. The man laughed heartily, the mole at the corner of his mouth hidden by wrinkles. But if you plan to just wait and see, shouldn't you revoke the immunity? He grinned. Duke's daughter, Callie's voice interrupted the vision. Charlotte snapped back to reality. She could only make an excuse. I suddenly felt dizzy. It seems I should follow your advice and rest well today. Duke's daughter, please rest well. Callie's closed the door for her before leaving. He appeared again. Charlotte had seen this man more than once now. Although the man had no name, she was certain he was the bastard who loudly mocked her father's death in the future she first saw. After proving Sass's identity, she had to immediately find out who the Empress minion was. Before they knew it, a week had passed. It was the day Charlotte had agreed upon with the Emperor. Everyone at the table had their own hidden agendas and thoughts. Some even whispered, "What is the Duke's daughter thinking?" A week's time can't change anything. However, because Charlotte was the Duke's daughter and known for her recklessness and arrogance, others didn't dare to say anything. After everything was prepared, the Emperor spoke, Duke Lienta's daughter and Baron Pinot. Young Master, please come forward. Young Master, please present the sacred object. The Duke's daughter can then begin to provide evidence. Duke Lienta, standing nearby, even though he believed in his daughter, couldn't help feeling nervous at this moment. If Sass really wasn't the prince, what would happen to his daughter? Charlotte stood up and said, "Before I start presenting evidence, there are a few things I need to clarify first. If I successfully prove the prince's identity, the magical artifact used to identify royal bloodlines did indeed function normally. Then I absolutely cannot allow accusations of me being a traitor." Young Master Pinot realized something was wrong. His heart sank and he hurriedly explained, I just brought the sacred object that only royalty can touch. Charlotte pressed on, "Is that sacred object truly only touchable by royalty?" Pinot said, "Of course, didn't everyone hear about this during the hunting season? If that's the case, if I also put my hand on this box, the same thing should happen, right?" The unsuspecting young Master Pinot asked in surprise. "What do you mean?" Charlotte walked straight to the sacred object. The moment her hand touched it, young Master Pinot automatically ducked down, shouting, "Everyone take cover." But to everyone's surprise, nothing happened. The entire room fell silent. He then recovered and awkwardly explained to everyone. "It seems that because Lienta is a family that has existed since the country's founding, they have a trace of royal blood. Is that really the case?" Charlotte questioned while reaching her right hand into the pocket of her dress. Then she once again placed her left hand on the sacred object. This time, the sacred object made a crackling sound. Oh my, young Master Pinot was shocked. The others present were also very surprised. Charlotte opened her right hand and showed young Master this is indeed a sacred object. However, its purpose is not what you think it is. This is just a sacred object that reacts to divine power. It turned out that a few days ago, after reuniting with Sass, to help the divine beast regain its lost divine power, Charlotte had placed the divine beast in the temple to absorb energy. If the purpose of the sacred object was to identify divine victory, she only needed to bring an item imbued with divine victory to prove it. However, such items only exist in temples and the royal family, so she looked around outside the temple. Now, the only one she could trust was the divine beast, even if it was very weak as long as it could gather divine victory. She crouched by the lake and called out, "Divine beast. Are you there? I need your divine power." But only silence answered her. She continued speaking to the water surface. "Actually, there's a group of people falsely accusing His Highness, the prince, saying he's an imposter. That's why I need an item with divine power, but I can't find such a thing." At this point, the lake water had started to ripple slightly. Charlotte pressed on, quickly pulling out a handkerchief. She pitifully wiped away the tears streaming from her eyes, sobbing helplessly. "If this continues, I really don't know how to help His Highness the Prince." Hearing Charlotte's choked and helpless voice, in an instant a black mist rose from the water's surface. From within, a divine beast the size of an egg, looking somewhat cute, emerged from the water with a defiant expression. It howled, "What a bunch of bastards. Take me there immediately. How dare they doubt the royalty I've certified." Charlotte demonstrated to His Majesty the Emperor that the true ability of this sacred object was to identify divine power, and that it could react to the divine power of the great divine beast. Everyone was discussing, did he just say divine power? Surely he doesn't mean His Highness the Prince was born with divine power. Everyone was in disbelief. No way. Hasn't the royal family's divine power been sealed for a long time? What's going on? To avoid misunderstanding, I must tell you something. After confirmation, I discovered that during the hunting season, His Highness, the Prince, possessed an item containing divine power. Do you all remember? Previously, didn't His Highness fall into the lake of the Divine Temple? The divine power in the lake seems to have seeped into the luminous stone pendant he was wearing that day. Young Master Pino still shamelessly said, "This is too absurd." Charlotte retorted, "Why is it absurd? Aren't there legends that some places are so sacred that divine beasts of light reside there? Isn't that right, Your Majesty the Empress?" Not wanting her long-planned scheme to fail, the Empress asked Charlotte if there was a way to prove that the pendant contained divine power. Unfortunately, that's impossible. The divine power in the pendant has all dissipated with that day's explosion, but I was lucky just in case I brought a stone from the lake beforehand. It contains divine power. This way, they shouldn't doubt Sass's divine power for now. If young Master Ronatus still doesn't believe it, he can try holding the divine beast himself. Young Master Ronatus actually snatched the divine beast, wanting to try it himself. The divine beast sensed that he was the audacious fellow who dared to bully its master. He wanted to teach him a good lesson. Charlotte gave a thumbs up behind her back, approving of the divine beast's performance. Renatus advised His Majesty not to be deceived by such flowery words. This is completely absurd, wanting to verify the results himself. He indeed suffered the consequences the moment he placed his hand on it. With a bang, just like during the hunting season, a huge explosion occurred. Young Master Pino was knocked to the ground by the massive impact. Charlotte mischievously looked at the divine beast. "That was amazing." She didn't forget to mock, he just held it and already fainted, what poor endurance. Walking forward, she demanded, "Young Master Ronatus, you should apologize properly to Her Majesty the Empress. His Majesty the Emperor and all the nobles present, as well as to me." Charlotte's gaze at His Majesty the Emperor was not a request, but more like an order. The room was filled with noisy voices. The Empress, sitting in her seat, clenched her fist tightly. She couldn't believe that after planning for so long, Charlotte still managed to ruin it. Everyone swarmed around, believing that Lienta had achieved great merit. They wanted to immediately start researching the temple's lake. Charlotte thought to herself, although everything I said was a lie, thankfully it resolved the matter safely. With the matter settled, the divine beast also said it needed to return to the divine temple immediately, and that priest who was bought by the Empress would inevitably face punishment. She needed to hurry and see Sass to tell him this good news. Unexpectedly, just as she was about to step into the carriage, her vision suddenly blurred. Her body uncontrollably staggered and began to fall. The Duke, who noticed something was wrong nearby, quickly ran over. In the moment of falling, he reached out and caught Charlotte just in time. In her hazy state, Charlotte didn't know who it was. She wanted to reach out to check, but still lost consciousness. A strange scene unfolded before Charlotte's eyes. "I was the one who met you first. I loved you even earlier than that woman." Although unconscious, Charlotte could intuitively understand what these scenes were. In the original story, when Callies and Ilian announced their marriage, the woman tightly grabbed the man's arm, constantly begging him to love her. The man had already endured this for a long time. This made Charlotte even more devastated. If so, then you shouldn't have endured from the beginning. If that's the case, Charlotte trembled all over. When the man was about to reach out to comfort her, she rejected him. She hated that he had already made up his mind. The man didn't say anything more, he turned and left. The story ended there. The next second she opened her eyes, it was as if it had all been a dream.